Have you ever been so sure about your life, your choices, only to have one unexpected moment tear everything apart? What if you never saw it coming? And then, suddenly, you couldn't look away. This is the story of a woman, a question, and a decision that would change everything. I'm 52 years old, and for most of my life, I played by the rules. I raised my daughter on my own after the divorce, built a little career in catering, and kept myself busy enough that I didn't notice how quietly the years slipped by. Love. I stopped thinking about it long ago, not because I didn't want it, but because I convinced myself I no longer needed it. I told myself I was content, safe in my routines, surrounded by familiar faces and predictable days. But what happened last weekend? It shook something loose inside me. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, and yet here I am. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake I did. It started on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. I had the windows open, letting the breeze carry in the scent of lilacs from the front yard, and I was deep into my spring cleaning, on my knees scrubbing the baseboards in the living room. The old wood creaked under me every time I shifted my weight. I had my favorite playlist humming in the background, a mix of 70s soul and soft rock, and I was feeling good, tired, but in that satisfying, productive way. That's when the door creaked open. I looked up, expecting my daughter, or maybe my friend Karen, who lives across the street. But instead, it was Ethan, my best friend Sharon's son. He's 24 now, I think, maybe 25. I hadn't seen him in a few months, not since Sharon's birthday barbecue. He used to come by all the time when he was younger, especially when his mom and I were both single, navigating motherhood like some chaotic two-woman circus. He was always polite, a little shy around me, but with a quiet charm. I stood up slowly, brushing my hands on my old leggings, which were dust-smudged and stretched at the knees. No, I was elbow-deep in dust in Donna Summer. I chuckled and motioned him in. "What's going on? Everything all right?" He stepped in fully, letting the door shut behind him. He looked different, more grown somehow. His hair was longer, messier in a deliberate kind of way. And he had that easy, lanky confidence that young men get once they figure out they're good-looking. But he still had that same softness in his eyes. "I was actually looking for Mom," he said. "She said she might be over here, but clearly I was wrong." "Nope, just me and my mop," I said, nudging the bucket with my foot. He laughed and stepped closer. "You always keep your house this clean?" "Old habits die hard. Plus, it keeps me sane. You want some lemonade? I just made a fresh pitcher." "Sure." I headed into the kitchen, poured 2 glasses, the kind with the little lemon slices floating at the top, and handed one to him. We stood there in the sunlit room for a moment, sipping in silence. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You always seemed too good for all this, you know." "Mm-hmm." I blinked. "Too good for what?" He shrugged. "Just this life, this house, the quiet, like you were meant for more but settled because you had to." It took me by surprise. I laughed, trying to brush it off. "Well, aren't you a philosopher now?" He didn't laugh back. He just watched me, his eyes steady and open, like he was waiting for me to admit something I didn't even know I'd been hiding. "Ethan," I said gently, "I made choices. Not all of them were perfect, but they got me here. And here isn't so bad." He set down his glass. I didn't mean to overstep. "You didn't," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "It's just strange hearing something so honest like that from you." He leaned against the counter, folding his arms. "You always listened to me when I was a kid. I guess I just thought maybe you needed someone to do the same for you. I looked away then, not because I was offended, but because something inside me twisted. A warmth and a painful ache all at once. No one had said something like that to me in years. We talked for a while longer about his job, his failed relationship, and the fact that he was thinking of moving back in with his mom for a bit. I teased him about it, and he grinned like I'd handed him the world. Eventually, I walked him to the door, expecting that to be the end of it. But just as he stepped out onto the porch, he turned around and said, "Carla, do you ever wonder what it would have been like if your life had gone differently?" I stood there frozen, the screen door between us, my hand on the frame. I didn't answer because the truth was I hadn't wondered. Not in years. But now I couldn't stop. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept replaying Ethan's question in my head. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if your life had gone differently? It had been so casual, tossed out like a thought in passing, but it landed in me like a stone in still water, sending ripples I couldn't ignore. Sunday morning came with a gray sky and a restless breeze. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the mug of coffee, warming my hands, but doing nothing for the chill in my chest. I built my life carefully, like a house of cards, safe, quiet, predictable, but Ethan's words had knocked something loose. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from him. Hey, I forgot my jacket at your place. Mind if I swing by and grab it? I typed back a simple, "Sure, I'll be here." He showed up less than an hour later, casual as ever in a navy hoodie and jeans. But something about him felt more deliberate. He knocked this time. I met him at the door, and we stood for a second just looking at each other, like neither of us quite knew how to act now. "I think it's on the chair in the living room," I said. He stepped inside, brushing past me gently. I could smell his cologne, clean, understated, just enough to notice. He picked up the jacket, held it for a beat, then turned back to face me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but I didn't say yes. He saw through it anyway. "You've been thinking about what I said," he added. "Maybe," I replied, folding my arms over my chest. "It just caught me off guard, that's all." He walked toward me, but stopped at a polite distance. I didn't mean to stir anything up. "No," I said quietly, "but you did, and maybe that's not such a bad thing." There was a pause, a kind of weight in the air. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy who used to play in my backyard, but a man, thoughtful, kind, and oddly intuitive. He was so different from the men I'd known in my own age group, less guarded, more open. It scared me and comforted me at the same time. "I used to think I was broken," I said suddenly. "After the divorce, after all the noise settled, I got used to being alone. I told myself that's just what life would be from then on." He stepped a little closer. "Maybe you were not broken. Maybe you were just never seen clearly." Those words, they stopped something in me. Or maybe they started something. I didn't know anymore. We ended up sitting on the couch, the same place where this all began. It was innocent at first, just two people talking. I told him stories from my younger years. He listened like they mattered. He told me about feeling lost lately, about how he felt more like himself around people who didn't expect him to perform. I didn't have the heart to ask what he meant by perform, but I understood the feeling behind it. At one point, I reached over to tuck my hair behind my ear, and my hand brushed his knee. It wasn't intentional, but I didn't pull away. Neither did he. Instead, he said, "You don't give yourself enough credit, Carla. You still glow." I let out a soft, incredulous laugh, shaking my head. "Glow, please. I'm 52, Ethan." He smiled. "So what? You think age cancels out beauty?" My heart beat a little faster. Then I looked away. "I don't know what you're doing," I whispered, "or why you're saying these things." He leaned in just enough that I could feel the warmth of him without being touched. "I'm saying them because they're true." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The house was still. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside, my breath caught in my throat, and I realized my hand was still resting close to his. I stood up abruptly, needing space to breathe. "You should probably go," I said, not unkindly. He didn't argue. He walked to the door, paused, then turned to look at me. "I meant what I said, Carla. You don't have to answer right now. But just don't pretend you didn't feel it, too." And then he left. The door closed softly behind him, and I stood in the hallway, one hand still wrapped around my waist, the other over my heart. I didn't know what I was feeling exactly, but I knew I'd never look at him, or myself, the same way again. The next few days were a blur of movement and distraction. I threw myself into work, catering a small retirement party on Tuesday, prepping for a bridal shower on Friday. I cleaned rooms that didn't need cleaning. I reorganized the pantry. I even tried meditating, though I couldn't quiet the noise in my own head long enough to breathe properly. But through all of it, Ethan's words haunted me. "You don't have to answer right now. Don't pretend you didn't feel it too." And the truth, I had felt something dangerous, something undeniable, But what scared me most wasn't what he said. It was how much I wanted to believe it. By Thursday evening, I was emotionally worn thin. The house was too quiet, and the silence made everything louder inside my mind. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the back porch, wrapped in an old cardigan, watching the sun slip behind the trees. That's when my phone buzzed again. "Ethan, I've been thinking about you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered, my heart thumped, and then I typed back. "Come by. Back porch. 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, I heard the gate creak open. He looked different in the evening light, less bold, more careful, like he knew we were standing at the edge of something and wasn't sure if I'd jump with him. "Hi," he said softly. I nodded, motioning to the chair across from mine. He sat down slowly, his knees brushing the edge of the blanket I had draped over mine. "I wasn't sure you'd respond," he said. "I wasn't sure either." There was a long pause between us. I could hear the crickets starting up in the yard, the low hum of life in the distance. My wineglass sat untouched beside me. "I meant what I said the other day," he continued, "about how you glow. It's not just some flattery. I see you, Carla, and not just the you everyone else sees." I turned toward him. "But why? Why now? You're young, Ethan? Ethan?" "I'm twice divorced, 52, and I'm not here because you're convenient," he interrupted gently. "I'm here because when I'm around you, I feel like I can breathe, like I don't have to act. You don't look at me like a project or a disappointment. You listen, you care. That matters." I swallowed hard. My fingers gripped the edge of the blanket. "You caught me off guard," I said. "I've spent so many years fading into the background, playing it safe. I stopped letting myself feel anything that couldn't be folded away neatly. I don't want to mess things up for you," he said. "But I needed you to know, because you're not invisible to me. You never were." He reached forward slowly and placed his hand over mine. Just a touch, nothing more. It felt like my skin had been waiting for that warmth. I didn't pull away. Instead, I whispered, "What are we even doing?" He leaned forward, his voice low. "We're just sitting here talking and maybe starting something that neither of us expected." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I wasn't sad. I was overwhelmed by the possibility, by the attention, by the fear that maybe I didn't deserve this. "I'm scared," I admitted. He nodded. "Me, too." But his hand stayed on mine. We didn't kiss. We didn't cross any invisible lines, but something passed between us, something soft, sacred, and quietly powerful. Eventually, the porch light buzzed on, and I realized how late it had gotten. He stood, hesitated, then leaned down and kissed the top of my hand like something out of another time. "Good night, Carla. Good night, Ethan." And once again, I watched him walk away. Only this time, my heart didn't feel so heavy. It felt open. The following weekend, I visited Sharon. We sat at her kitchen table, drinking coffee, laughing about old stories, things from when our kids were little, when we were still piecing our lives together after our divorces. She looked tired, like most women our age do after decades of caretaking and compromise, but content, grounded. I envied that. At one point, I almost brought up Ethan. Almost. But the words never made it past my lips because the truth was, I didn't know what to call what was happening, and I wasn't ready to define it. Not to myself, and certainly not to his mother. After I left her place, I drove around for a while. Past the lake where I used to take my daughter to feed ducks. Past the street where I kissed someone for the first time in high school. Past all the markers of a life I'd built with care, even if it didn't always feel full. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I saw Ethan sitting on my front steps. He stood as I got out of the car, looking uncertain for the first time. "I didn't want to text," he said. "Didn't want to assume." I smiled gently. "You didn't have to? We sat inside this time. Voici." On the couch again, the same one where this all began, but the energy between us had shifted. Not more intense, not even romantic, just more honest. "I told my mom I might move to Portland," he said. "Oh, for work, maybe school, but also just to figure things out." I nodded slowly. "That sounds like something you need." "I think so." There was a pause, and then he turned to me. "But before I go, I needed to see you again, because what happened between us, it wasn't nothing, and I didn't want to leave without acknowledging that." I looked down at my hands. They were older now, softer, a little wrinkled from years of dishwater and work, but they still held so much. "I felt it too," I said quietly. But I'm not looking for something complicated, Ethan. I'm tired. I want peace. He smiled softly. Maybe this is peace, just knowing someone saw you. That someone cared, even if just for a moment. He leaned in then and kissed me softly just once, like punctuation to a sentence we both knew had to end here. And I kissed him back, not because I wanted more, but because I wanted to say thank you for reminding me that I was still capable of feeling something. We didn't make promises. We didn't pretend this would become anything more. He left that evening, and I stood by the window for a long time after he drove off, watching the quiet street, the pale light of dusk settling in. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be invisible, how I wore my solitude like a shield. Ugh. But now someone had seen me. And more importantly, I had let myself be seen. Maybe that was the real story, not about Ethan, but about me. About waking up again. About realizing that life still had little surprises tucked in its corners. Even for a woman in her 50s. Especially for a woman in her 50s. And as I turned off the porch light and headed upstairs, I smiled to myself. I wasn't done yet.